As the snowflakes danced in the harsh December wind, 8-month-old Emma lay bundled in her carrier, abandoned between luxury cars in the mall's vast parking lot. Her cries went unheard by the shoppers rushing past with arms full of holiday gifts. But 13-year-old Jamal, who swept the parking lot after school to help his grandmother pay rent, noticed the tiny pink bundle trembling in the growing darkness. Time seemed to freeze as he approached, his worn broom still clutched in his calloused hands, and peered into the carrier to find tear-stained cheeks and desperate eyes looking back at him. The security cameras would later reveal the unthinkable. Emma's father, investment banker Richard Hartwell, had deliberately placed his daughter there before driving away in his Bentley, his face expressionless as he abandoned his only child to the bitter cold. Jamal Parker stood frozen, the harsh wind cutting through his thin uniform jacket. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. "Stay out of trouble, child. We can't afford no problems." Finding an abandoned baby certainly qualified as trouble. He glanced around the emptying parking lot. The mall would close in 30 minutes, and most shoppers had already hurried home to escape the building storm. Emma's whimpers grew stronger as Jamal carefully adjusted the blanket around her tiny body. "Hey there," he whispered, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "It's gonna be okay." Emma's crying softened at the sound of his voice. Her tiny fingers reached out and Jamal felt something shift inside him. He couldn't just walk away. He scanned the lot for security but saw no one. The mall entrance was 100 yards away, across ice-slicked pavement. Leaving Emma to find help seemed wrong, but so did moving her. "Think, Jamal," he muttered to himself. His phone had died hours ago. Grandmother always said dead phones meant irresponsible children. She was right. As usual, Emma's cries strengthened, her little face reddening with effort. The temperature was dropping by the minute. "I'm not leaving you," Jamal decided, setting his broom against a car. He carefully lifted the carrier, surprised by its expensive weight and quality. Who would abandon something so precious? He headed toward the security office at the mall entrance, walking carefully on the slippery surface. The baby quieted as they moved, perhaps comforted by the gentle motion. As he approached the entrance, a security guard emerged, keys jingling. "Mall's closing, kid," the guard called out, not yet noticing what Jamal carried. "Sir, I need help," Jamal called, his voice cracking. "I found a baby in the parking lot." The guard's dismissive expression shifted to confusion, then shock as he approached. "What did you say?" "A baby, sir, just sitting there between the cars, no one around." The guard, whose name tag read Wilson, leaned down to look at Emma, whose blue eyes were now wide open, staring up at the strangers, discussing her fate. "Jesus Christ," Wilson whispered, immediately reaching for his radio. "This for real?" "Would I make this up?" Jamal asked, a rare edge of defiance in his voice. Wilson studied Jamal's face, then spoke rapidly into his radio. "I need police and an ambulance at the west entrance. Found an abandoned infant. No, I'm not joking." As they waited, Wilson ushered them inside the empty mall where it was warmer. "You did the right thing, son," he said, his earlier dismissiveness replaced with something like respect. "You probably saved this little one's life." Jamal nodded, still holding the carrier close. "What's going to happen to her?" "Police will try to find the parents. If they can't," Wilson shrugged, "foster care probably." Emma's tiny hand had somehow escaped the blanket again. Without thinking, Jamal offered his finger, and she grasped it with surprising strength. In that moment, a connection formed between them, a silent promise that somehow Jamal would make sure she was okay. Outside, the wail of sirens cut through the winter night, growing louder as help approached. Jamal felt both relief and apprehension. He had avoided trouble his whole life, kept his head down, worked hard. Now he was about to be at the center of something big, something messy. But looking down at Emma's trusting eyes, he knew there had been no other choice. Red and blue lights flashed across the mall's glass facade as 2 police cruisers and an ambulance arrived within minutes of each other. Jamal stood back as EMTs rushed forward, their practiced hands immediately checking Emma's vital signs, temperatures. Low, but not critical, a female paramedic announced, her voice calm despite the urgency of her movements. Pulse steady, no obvious signs of trauma. Jamal watched as they wrapped Emma in special thermal blankets, the carrier abandoned on a nearby bench. He felt oddly protective of this child he'd known for less than an hour. A police officer with kind eyes approached. "I'm Officer Dawson. Can you tell me exactly what happened?" Jamal recounted finding Emma, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I was just doing my job, sweeping up before closing. I heard crying, but thought it was just the wind at first. Then I saw the carrier." Officer Dawson took notes. "Did you see anyone leave the baby?" "No, sir. But the security cameras might have caught something." The officer nodded approvingly. "Smart thinking." Wilson, the security guard, led another officer to the surveillance room, while Jamal continued answering questions. Yes, he worked at the mall. No, he hadn't seen any suspicious persons. Yes, his grandmother knew he was working late tonight. As if summoned by the thought, Jamal spotted his grandmother's ancient Buick pulling into the now crowded parking lot. She moved with surprising speed for her 65 years, her worn coat clutched tightly around her small frame. "Jamal Parker," her voice carried across the parking lot. "What have you gotten yourself into now?" "Nothing bad, Grandma," he called back. "I promise." Officer Dawson interceded, explaining the situation. Marjorie Parker's stern expression softened as she glanced toward the ambulance where Emma was being treated. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she murmured, placing a protective hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You did right, child." Jamal felt a weight lift from his chest. His grandmother's approval meant everything. The second officer emerged from the mall, his face grim. "We've got footage, clear as day." Man in an expensive suit leaves the carrier and drives off in a black Bentley. "Can you make out the license plate?" Officer Dawson asked. "Better than that." "We got a clear shot of his face when he looked up at the camera, almost like he wanted to be seen." A cold feeling settled in Jamal's stomach at these words. What kind of person abandons their baby and then makes sure they're caught on camera doing it? The paramedics had finished their initial assessment and were preparing to transport Emma to the hospital. One approached Jamal and his grandmother. "She's stable, just cold and hungry. Probably been out there less than an hour. Any longer in this weather—" She didn't finish the sentence. Jamal hesitated. "Can I know what happens to her?" The paramedic smiled gently. "That's up to social services, but I can tell Officer Dawson knows how to reach you." Jamal nodded, watching as they loaded Emma into the ambulance. Her eyes, briefly open, seemed to search the crowd until they landed on him. Then the doors closed, and she was gone. "Time to go home," his grandmother said firmly. "You've had enough excitement for one night." As they walked to the car, Officer Dawson called after them. "We'll need a formal statement tomorrow, Jamal." "You're our key witness." "Witness?" The word hung in the air like the snowflakes around them. Somehow, in the space of an hour, Jamal had gone from invisible mall sweeper to key witness in what was clearly becoming a criminal investigation. In the car, his grandmother drove in silence for several blocks before speaking. "You know this isn't over, right? This is just beginning." Jamal nodded, watching the ambulance's taillights disappear into the snowy night. "I know, Grandma, I know." Richard Hartwell's Bentley purred up the circular driveway of his Georgian mansion, tires crunching on fresh snow. Christmas lights twinkled along the roofline, installed that morning by workers who charged triple their usual rate for the holiday rush. The effect was perfect, exactly what was expected of the Hartwell estate. Inside the car, Richard's hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, straightened his tie, and practiced his smile. It didn't reach his eyes. The grand foyer gleamed with marble and crystal when he entered. Elaine, his wife of 4 years, descended the curved staircase in a designer dress, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo. At 32, she was 15. Years his junior, and still moved with the grace of the former ballet dancer she was. "You're late," she said, checking her diamond watch. "The Whitmore's charity gala starts in an hour." Richard hung his coat with practiced nonchalance. "Traffic. The storm's getting worse. "Where's Emma?" Elaine glanced behind him toward the door. "With Maria," he replied smoothly. "I thought we discussed this. The nanny is keeping her overnight." Elaine's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together. "We did not discuss this. I wanted to say goodnight to her before we left." She was fussy. Maria took her home early. "You can call her tomorrow." Richard moved toward the bar cart and poured himself 3 fingers of Macallan, needing the burn. "Of alcohol to steady his nerves. That's not like Maria to leave without telling me." Elaine pulled out her phone. Richard's hand closed around her wrist, just tight enough to make her look up in surprise. "The gala, Elaine. A $15,000 plate. Senator Williams will be there. Focus on what matters." She pulled her arm away, a flash of something. Fear? Anger? Crossing her face before her society mask slipped back into place. Of course. Upstairs, the nursery stood silent and empty. Emma's stuffed animals lined the shelves of a room designed by a celebrity decorator. The mobile above her crib, hand-carved, woodland creatures imported from Switzerland, hung motionless. The room had been photographed for Architectural Digest just last month. "Perfection in pink and gray," the caption had read. Richard finished his scotch in one swallow and poured another. The financial documents hidden in his office safe wouldn't wait much longer. The audit was coming. The shell companies were collapsing. His world, built on facades and financial sleight of hand, was crumbling beneath him. "Richard?" Elaine called from the master suite. "The car service will be here in 20 minutes. "Coming," he answered, voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. In their bedroom, Elaine was putting on diamond earrings, anniversary gifts he'd purchased with money that wasn't his. She looked like the trophy wife his partners had said he needed. The perfect accessory to success. "Did you see the invitation?" "To the governor's New Year's ball," she asked, oblivious to his turmoil. "Front row at the midnight toast. The Petersons will be green with envy." Richard adjusted his cufflinks. "Lovely. And Emma's trust fund paperwork came today. I left it on your desk." His stomach clenched. Another problem. The trust fund was empty, had been for months. The money funneled into one desperate investment after another, trying to plug the holes in his financial dam. "I'll look at it tomorrow," he said. "The black tie or the midnight blue?" Elaine held up 2 options. "Black." She nodded, helping him into the jacket with practiced efficiency. In the mirror, they looked perfect. The power couple, the success story. No one would guess that the man in the reflection had just abandoned. His infant daughter in a freezing parking lot had calculated the odds of discovery against the insurance payout that would solve all his problems. "You seem tense," Elaine observed, straightening his tie with manicured fingers. Richard forced a smile, leaning down to kiss her cheek. "Just tired. Year-end reports, nothing for you to worry about." "That's what I like to hear." She smiled, the perfect vapid expression he'd once found so appealing. "Let's put on a good show tonight. The Whitmores are potential investors, aren't they?" "They are indeed," Richard replied, offering his arm as they headed downstairs. The doorbell rang. Their driver was early. Instead, 2 police officers stood on the porch, snowflakes dusting their shoulders. "Richard Hartwell?" the female officer asked. "Yes?" His voice remained steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "We need to ask you some questions about your daughter, Emma." Detective Sarah Martinez had been working in crimes against children for 8 years, long enough to recognize genuine shock when she saw it. Elaine Hartwell's reaction to learning her daughter had been abandoned in a mall parking lot was real. The woman had collapsed into a chair, trembling violently, all color draining from her face. "I don't understand," Elaine kept repeating, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Emma is with the nanny. Maria has her." Richard said. Her gaze darted to her husband, realization dawning in her eyes. Richard Hartwell, by contrast, was a study in controlled reactions. "Too controlled," Martinez noted. His surprise seemed rehearsed, his concern measured in just the right doses. "There must be some mistake," he insisted, standing behind his seated wife, one hand on her shoulder, in what appeared to be a comforting gesture. But Martinez didn't miss how his fingers dug into Elaine's skin, or how she winced slightly at the pressure. "No mistake, Mr. Hartwell. Martinez's partner, Detective Wilson, said flatly. "We have you on security camera leaving the carrier between two cars at Ridgeview Mall at approximately 5:42 p.m. Richard's composure wavered slightly. "I want my lawyer." "Richard." Elaine looked up, shock giving way to horror. "What have you done? Where is Emma? Is she okay?" "Your daughter is at Mercy Hospital," Martinez told her gently. "She's being treated for mild hypothermia and dehydration, but the doctors expect a full recovery. She was found by a young man who works at the mall." Relief flooded Elaine's face. "Thank God. I need to go to her. Right now." "Of course," Martinez nodded. "Officer Jenkins will drive you to the hospital." Richard moved as if to follow, but Wilson stepped forward. "I'm afraid you'll need to come with us, Mr. Hartwell. We have some questions that won't wait." "I'm not saying anything without my attorney present," Richard repeated, his voice hardening. "That's your right," Martinez acknowledged. "But we're placing you under arrest for child endangerment and abandonment. You can call your lawyer from the station." As they read him his rights, Richard's eyes narrowed. "Do you have any idea who I am? Who my friends are? This won't end well for your career, Detective." Martinez had heard similar threats before from men like Richard Hartwell, men who believed their wealth and connections placed them above consequences. She continued reciting his rights without missing a beat. In the foyer, Elaine was frantically gathering her purse and coat, her party dress now incongruously formal for a hospital visit. "I don't understand why," she said more to herself than anyone else. "Why would he do this?" Martinez didn't offer platitudes. In her experience, the why often became clear during the investigation, and it was rarely simple. "The boy who found Emma," Elaine said suddenly. "Who is he? I need to thank him." "Jamal Parker," Martinez replied, 13 years old, "works as a janitor at the mall after school." "Jamal," Elaine repeated, testing the name. "He saved my baby's life." In the driveway, they separated, Richard in handcuffs to the police cruiser, Elaine to a different car bound for the hospital. The Christmas lights continued to twinkle around the perfect house, now witness to its disintegrating facade. Back at the station, Martinez set up the interview room while Wilson processed Richard's intake. Their case was strong. The security footage was unambiguous, but they needed motive. Child abandonment cases typically stemmed from desperation, mental illness, or substance abuse. Richard Hartwell, with his mansion and Bentley, didn't fit. The usual profile, Martinez reviewed her notes as she waited. The Hartwells had appeared to be the perfect family. Wealthy investment banker father, former ballerina mother, cherished baby daughter. Their social media showcased a life of privilege and happiness. But Martinez had been a detective long enough to know that public images often concealed private realities. Her phone buzzed with a text from Wilson. "Background check, flag something. SEC investigating Hartwell's firm, pulling financial records. Now." Martinez nodded to herself. Money. It was often about money. When Richard finally entered the interview room, his lawyer in tow, his earlier arrogance had hardened into cold determination. The attorney, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit, immediately began challenging the evidence. Martinez simply played the security footage. There on the screen, unmistakably, was Richard Hartwell, placing the carrier between two cars, looking directly at the camera for a moment, then walking away without a backward glance. "My client was under extreme duress," the lawyer began. Martinez cut her off. "Save it for court. Right now, I want to know why a man who appears to have everything would leave his baby to freeze to death 2 weeks before Christmas." Richard's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. The game was on. Sunrise filtered through thin curtains in the small apartment Jamal shared with his grandmother. He hadn't slept well, Emma's face appearing in his dreams throughout the night. The sounds of Marjorie Parker moving around the kitchen, the gentle clink of dishes, the bubbling of the ancient coffee maker, provided a comforting backdrop as he got ready for school. "You eating today or just staring at the wall?" his grandmother called. Jamal emerged from his bedroom, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Sorry, Grandma, just thinking about that baby." She set a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. "Eat." Thinking works better on a full stomach. Their apartment was modest but immaculate. 2 bedrooms in a building that had seen better days, but was kept decent by tenants who took pride in their homes despite limited means. Photos lined the walls. Jamal's parents on their wedding day. Both gone now, his father to violence, his mother to grief. Jamal receiving academic awards. Marjorie in her nurse's aide uniform before retirement. "Will they let us know if she's okay?" Jamal asked, picking at his breakfast. Marjorie sat across from him, her own plate untouched. "I called the hospital this morning. Baby's doing fine. Mother showed up last night." Apparently had no idea what the father had done. Relief washed over Jamal. "So she'll go home with her mom?" "Not that simple. Child Services is involved now." Marjorie sipped her coffee. "They need to make sure the mother's home is safe." Jamal nodded, understanding the complexities better than most. 13-year-olds, 3 kids in his class were in foster care. The system wasn't kind, especially to babies like Emma. "You'll be late if you don't hurry," Marjorie said, glancing at the clock. "And I promised Ms. Reynolds I'd help with the church food drive this morning." Jamal shoveled the last of his eggs into his mouth and grabbed his coat. A Christmas gift from the year before, already too small at the wrists. "See you after school, Grandma?" "Jamal." Her voice stopped him at the door. "I'm proud of what you did." "Your mama would be too." A lump formed in his throat. "Thanks, Grandma." Outside, the morning was cold but clear, the storm having moved on. During the night, Jamal walked the 6 blocks to Franklin Middle School, his mind still on Emma and the events of the previous evening. School passed in a blur. Jamal was a good student, not exceptional, but consistent. He liked math and science, struggled a bit with English, and excelled in the robotics club that met after school on Tuesdays. Today was Thursday, which meant his mall job started at 4:30 by lunch. Word had somehow spread about his role in rescuing the abandoned baby. A local news van was parked outside the school, and the principal called Jamal to the office. "They want to interview you," Principal Morris explained. "It's a good news story, and frankly, this school could use some positive press." Jamal shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want to be on TV." Morris seemed surprised. "Most kids would jump at the chance." "I'm not most kids," Jamal replied quietly. "And it wasn't about me, it was about Emma." The principal studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll tell them you're unavailable. But Jamal, what you did was extraordinary. Don't forget that." "Yes, sir." Despite the principal's intervention, Jamal spent the day fielding questions from classmates, some genuinely concerned, others just seeking gossip. By final period, he was exhausted. His phone, charged now, buzzed with a text from his grandmother. A detective called. "Needs your statement after school. Coming to pick you up." Marjorie was waiting in the Buick when classes ended, the heater running full blast against the December chill. "You're famous," she remarked as he slid into the passenger seat. "Mrs. Johnson at church called me. Said she saw your picture in the online news." "They didn't interview me," Jamal protested. "Security camera footage," Marjorie explained. "Shows you finding the baby. They're calling you a hero." Jamal stared out the window as they drove toward the police station. Hero. The word felt wrong. He'd just done what anyone should do. The detective who interviewed him was kind but thorough. She asked him to recount every detail, from finding Emma to waiting for the authorities. When they finished, she handed him her card. "You may need to testify if this goes to trial," she explained. "From what we're seeing, the father planned this. It wasn't a moment of desperation." Jamal nodded, the weight of his involvement growing. Heavier. As they left the station, a woman approached, blonde, elegant despite her obvious exhaustion, eyes red from crying. "Are you Jamal?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. "The boy who found my Emma?" Marjorie's arm went protectively around Jamal's shoulders. "Who's asking?" "I'm Elaine Hartwell, Emma's mother." She took a shaky breath. "I wanted to thank you." "The doctor said, they said she might not have survived much longer in that cold." Jamal met her gaze. "Is she okay now?" Elaine nodded, tears welling. "Yes, thanks to you." An awkward silence fell between them, the wealthy ballet dancer and the janitor boy, connected by an abandoned child and an act of basic humanity. "If there's ever anything I can do for you," Elaine finally said, Please let me know. Marjorie's grip tightened slightly on Jamal's shoulder. He didn't do it for a reward, Mrs. Hartwell. No, of course not. I just meant, Elaine fumbled for words. It's okay, Jamal said quietly. I'm just glad Emma's all right. As they walked away, Marjorie muttered, rich folks always think everything has a price. But Jamal was thinking about Elaine Hartwell's eyes, haunted, confused, filled with a pain he recognized all too well, the pain of someone whose world had just shattered. Mercy Hospital's pediatric ward was painted in cheerful colors that couldn't quite mask the institutional atmosphere. Elaine Hartwell sat beside Emma's crib, watching her daughter sleep peacefully, tiny chest rising and falling beneath hospital-issue pajamas. A stuffed elephant, standard issue for pediatric patients, was tucked beside her. For the third consecutive day, Elaine had barely left this spot. The nurses had brought her toiletries, offered the shower in the staff lounge, and kept her supplied. With terrible coffee, they treated her with a careful neutrality. Not quite suspicion, but not the warmth usually extended to worried mothers. Mrs. Hartwell? A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. I'm Diane Wilson from Child Protective Services. Elaine straightened, smoothing her rumpled blouse. Despite her disheveled appearance, the elegant bone structure of her face and her naturally perfect posture betrayed her years of ballet training. Is it time for our meeting? Elaine checked her watch. I thought that was at 4. It is. I'm early because Dr. Patel will be joining us, and I wanted to introduce myself first. Ms. Wilson was middle-aged with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. How is Emma today? Better. They're talking about releasing her tomorrow. That's what we need to discuss. Ms. Wilson pulled up a chair. We need to determine the safest placement for Emma upon discharge. Elaine's fingers tightened on the crib rail. She's coming home with me. That's one possibility we'll consider, Ms. Wilson replied carefully. But given the circumstances, I had no idea what Richard was planning, Elaine interrupted, her voice breaking. I would never harm my child, never. Before Ms. Wilson could respond, a light knock sounded at the door. A nurse poked her head in. Mrs. Hartwell? There's a young man here asking to see the baby. Says his name is Jamal Parker? Elaine's expression softened. Yes, please let him in. Jamal entered hesitantly, clutching a small paper bag. His grandmother waited in the doorway, a silent sentinel. Hello, Jamal, Elaine said, rising from her chair. Please, come in. Jamal approached the crib slowly, his eyes fixed on Emma. The baby was awake now, regarding the newcomer with solemn interest. She looks better, he said quietly. Much better, Elaine agreed. The doctors say she's completely recovered. Jamal nodded, then reached into his bag. I brought her something. It's not new or anything, but he pulled out a small stuffed dog, worn but clean. This was mine when I was little. Grandma said it's okay to give it to her. Elaine blinked back tears as Jamal carefully placed the toy beside Emma. The baby immediately reached for it, tiny fingers exploring the soft fur. That's very kind of you, she managed. We can't stay, Marjorie said from the doorway. Jamal has homework, and I've got dinner in the slow cooker. Of course, Elaine nodded. Thank you for coming. Jamal lingered for a moment, watching as Emma clutched his old toy. Something passed between them. A connection Elaine couldn't quite define but could definitely see. Bye, Emma, he whispered. Be good for your mom. After they left, Ms. Wilson, who had observed the interaction silently, made a note in her file. That's the boy who found her? Yes, Elaine replied, still watching the door where Jamal had disappeared. He visits every day after school, just for a few minutes. I think Emma recognizes him somehow. Before Ms. Wilson could comment, Dr. Patel arrived for their meeting. The discussion was difficult. Clinical assessments of Emma's health, pointed questions about Elaine's awareness of Richard's financial troubles, evaluations of her parenting capabilities. I understand you travel frequently for charity events, Ms. Wilson noted. Who cares for Emma during those times? Maria, our nanny. But I always cut trips short when I can. Emma is my priority. And you never noticed anything unusual about your husband's behavior recently? No signs of stress or unusual decisions regarding Emma? Elaine closed her eyes, memories washing over her. Richard's increasing irritability, the late nights at the office, the way he'd flinched when she mentioned Emma's trust fund. I should have seen something, she admitted, but Richard always handled the finances, the business side of our lives. I focused on Emma and our social obligations. Dr. Patel and Ms. Wilson exchanged glances. Mrs. Hartwell, Ms. Wilson said gently, I'll be honest, we have concerns about releasing Emma into your custody immediately. There will need to be a home evaluation, and given the ongoing investigation into your husband's actions, you can't... Take her from me, Elaine interrupted, panic rising in her voice. She needs her mother. We're considering temporary placement with a foster family specially trained for infants, just until... No. Elaine's ballet-trained spine straightened to its full height. I'll get a hotel room. I'll stay with friends, whatever it takes to keep her with me. Dr. Patel intervened. Perhaps we could discuss alternative arrangements. Mrs. Hartwell has been attentive during Emma's hospital stay, and separation at this age can be traumatic. As they debated her daughter's fate, Elaine's gaze returned to Emma, now sleeping peacefully, with Jamal's stuffed dog clutched in one tiny fist. The sight steadied her. I'll do whatever is necessary, she said firmly. Parenting classes, supervision, selling the house, anything. But Emma stays with me. Something in her tone must have conveyed her determination. After further discussion, a compromise was reached. Emma would be released to Elaine's care, but they would stay at a hotel under daily CPS supervision until a proper home evaluation could be completed. Later, alone with Emma, Elaine whispered promises to her sleeping daughter. It will be different now. Just you and me. I'll be the mother you deserve. Emma's only response was to clutch the worn, stuffed dog tighter, the unexpected gift from a boy who had changed both their lives. The story broke on local news first. Investment banker abandons infant daughter in mall parking lot. By morning, national outlets had picked it up, the headline growing more sensational with each iteration. Wealthy father leaves baby to die. In blizzard, teen janitor saves abandoned heiress. Wall Street dad's frozen heart, the shocking true story. Jamal's walk to school became a gauntlet of news vans and reporters shouting questions. Principal Morris had to establish a no-press zone around the school property. The mall placed security at the employee entrance. Marjorie unplugged their landline after the fifth call from a producer offering exclusive interview opportunities. Vultures, she muttered, drawing the curtains against a photographer who'd been staking out their apartment building. Making entertainment from other people's suffering. Jamal sat at the kitchen table scrolling through news articles on his phone. The descriptions of him varied wildly. Heroic teen, impoverished janitor, at-risk youth, turned Good Samaritan. One conservative outlet emphasized his status as being raised by his grandmother in the absence of parents, while a liberal one painted him as a victim of systemic inequality who transcended his circumstances to become a hero. None of them felt like him. None captured the simple truth. He had found a baby and done what anyone should do. Richard Hartwell's portrait was equally distorted, but in the opposite direction. Business publications highlighted his brilliant investment strategies and meteoric rise while questioning if this was a mental health crisis for an otherwise exemplary businessman. Celebrity gossip sites dug up photos of Richard and Elaine at galas, speculating about marital troubles and secret addictions. The mall security footage played in an endless loop on cable news, Richard placing the carrier walking away, the timestamp, showing the temperature at 24 degrees Fahrenheit. Experts debated how long Emma would have survived in the cold. Medical correspondents explained infant hypothermia in gruesome detail. Turn that off, Marjorie said, entering the kitchen to find Jamal watching a news segment. Nothing good comes from seeing yourself through strangers' eyes. At school, Jamal's classmates treated him differently. Some avoided him, uncomfortable with his sudden notoriety. Others pestered him with questions, demanding insider details. A few girls who had never spoken to him before suddenly found reasons to sit nearby. At lunch, Mrs. Rodriguez, his science teacher, pulled him aside after class. "You doing okay with all this attention, Jamal?" He shrugged. "Just waiting for it to blow over." "People need heroes," she said gently, "especially around the holidays. But remember, what matters is what you know about yourself, not what they say on TV." The attention affected his job too. Mall patrons pointed and whispered as he swept. Some approached to shake his hand or take selfies, which Mr. Davis, the maintenance supervisor, discouraged. "You're still on the clock," he reminded Jamal, though not unkindly. Hero or not. The story took another turn when details of Richard Hartwell's financial dealings began to surface. Detective Martinez's investigation had uncovered evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and a complex Ponzi scheme that had kept Hartwell Investments afloat for years. Business reporters who had previously lauded Richard now dissected his web of deception and calculated criminal enterprise. Most disturbing to Jamal was the discovery of a recently purchased life insurance policy on Emma, with Richard as the sole beneficiary. The implication was clear. Abandonment was just the first step in a darker plan. When this news broke, the media's focus shifted slightly. Elaine Hartwell, previously portrayed as either a clueless socialite or a potential accomplice, was recast as another victim of Richard's deception. Photos emerged of her leaving the hotel where she and Emma were staying under CPS supervision. Elaine's face drawn, shoulders hunched against the cameras, a diaper bag clutched in one hand. "What happens now?" Jamal asked his grandmother as they watched the evening news. "With Emma and her mom?" Marjorie sighed. "Courts will decide. That poor baby's life is in the hands of judges and social workers now." A segment about community response to the story appeared on screen. Footage showed a candlelight vigil outside Mercy Hospital, people leaving stuffed animals and cards at a makeshift shrine. Then the reporter was standing outside Jamal and Marjorie's apartment building. "In this modest neighborhood, a young hero lives quietly with his grandmother," the reporter intoned. Jamal Parker, whose quick thinking saved baby Emma Hartwell, has declined all interview requests. Neighbors describe him as a serious, hard-working boy who helps elderly residents with groceries and shovels sidewalks without being asked. The Alpuid camera panned to Mrs. Abernathy from the first floor, her ancient face beaming. "That boy is special, always has been. His mother raised him right before she passed, and his grandmother continues the good work. Not surprised he saved that baby. That's who Jamal is." Marjorie snorted, but Jamal noticed the gleam of tears in her eyes. "At least someone got something right," she muttered. The story continued to evolve over the next few days. Richard Hartwell's bail was denied due to flight risk. Former colleagues came forward with tales of his ruthless business practices and lavish spending. Financial experts estimated investor losses in the millions. Through it all, Jamal kept his head down. He went to school, worked his mall job, visited Emma at the hotel when Elaine invited him. The media attention would fade eventually, but the connection he felt to the baby girl whose life had intersected with his on a snowy December evening, that showed no signs of diminishing. Detective Sarah Martinez spread financial documents across her desk, the paper trail of Richard Hartwell's life unraveling before her. Bank statements, investment reports, loan applications, insurance policies, each piece added to a troubling picture. He was underwater, she told her partner, Detective Wilson. Way underwater. The firm was a house of cards. Wilson nodded, reviewing his own stack of papers. Timeline matches up. Started making risky investments about 3 years ago, right after he married Elaine. Classic pressure, Martinez agreed. Young trophy wife, keeping up appearances, lifestyle. Beyond his means, she tapped an insurance document. But this is what seals it for me. $5 million policy on Emma taken out just 6 weeks ago. Accelerated payout for accidental death. Jesus, Wilson muttered. You think abandonment was just the first attempt? That if someone hadn't found her, that was the plan, Martinez confirmed grimly. Leave her to die of exposure, collect the payout, solve his financial problems. Clean. Almost impossible to prove his murder, except for the security footage. Martinez frowned. That's what still bothers me. Why look directly at the camera? He's not stupid, far from it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Officer Dawson entered, holding a flash drive. You need to see this. Hartwell's business partner finally gave us access to their private server. Emails going back 5 years. Martinez plugged in the drive, and they began scrolling through messages. Most were standard business communications, but a folder labeled Personal contained exchanges between Richard and a private detective he'd hired to investigate Elaine's background before their marriage. He was obsessed with her fertility, Wilson noted, reading over Martinez's shoulder. Wanted proof she could have children. Trophy wife and heir producer, Martinez said disgustedly. Charming. But it was an email thread from 3 months ago that made Martinez sit up straight. The subject line read simply, DNA results. Oh, hell, she breathed, reading the contents. Emma isn't his biological child. The paternity test Richard had secretly commissioned showed a 0% chance he was Emma's father. Subsequent emails to his lawyer discussed divorce options, prenuptial enforcement, and custody rights. This changes things, Wilson said. If he knew Emma wasn't his it's still attempted murder, Martinez countered, but it gives us more to work with. The abandonment wasn't just about money, it was revenge. Further emails revealed Richard's growing rage at the perceived betrayal, his determination to ruin Elaine, and his fury at being tricked into raising another man's child. The final email, sent the day before the abandonment, was to his financial advisor. Once this is resolved, I'll have capital to cover the Weber shortfall. Anticipate funds by year end. Martinez leaned back, piecing it together. He couldn't divorce her without exposing his financial fraud during discovery, couldn't kill her without obvious suspicion. But Emma, a tragic accident, grieving parents. Insurance payout, Wilson finished, and he'd be rid of the child that wasn't his. We need to talk to Elaine, Martinez decided. Find out if she even knows. They found Elaine at the hotel where she and Emma were staying under CPS supervision. The formerly elegant woman looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes as she answered the door. Is this about Richard? She asked, gesturing them in. Emma's finally napping. I'd rather not wake her. Martinez chose her words carefully. We've uncovered some information that may be difficult to hear, but it's relevant to understanding your husband's motives. Elaine sat stiffly on the edge of the bed. Nothing about Richard would surprise me anymore. Did you know that he had a paternity test done on Emma? The color drained from Elaine's face. What? Martinez watched her reaction closely. The shock appeared genuine. The results showed he's not Emma's biological father, Wilson said gently. We found emails indicating he discovered this about 3 months ago. Elaine's hand flew to her mouth. That's impossible. I've never been with anyone else. Never. Martinez and Wilson exchanged glances. The test results were conclusive, Mrs. Hartwell. Then the test is wrong. Elaine stood up, agitated. Or he falsified it somehow. Richard wanted a reason to leave us. He must have fabricated this. Is there any possibility? Wilson began. No. Tears sprang to Elaine's eyes. I was a professional ballerina until I met Richard. My life was dancing, nothing else. He was my first serious relationship. Emma is his daughter. Martinez considered the possibility Elaine was lying, but her distress seemed too raw, too immediate. We'd like your permission to run another test, she said, to confirm or refute the results Richard obtained. Elaine nodded immediately. Yes. Absolutely, you'll see. A soft cry came from the portable crib in the corner. Emma was awake, small hands reaching upward. Elaine went to her, lifting her with practiced tenderness. Look at her, Elaine said, turning so the detectives could see Emma's face. She has Richard's eyes, his chin. Everyone says so. Martinez studied the baby. There was a resemblance, though infant features were often ambiguous. We'll expedite the testing, she promised. As they prepared to leave, Elaine asked, does this change anything? Legally, I mean? Regardless of paternity. What Richard did was attempted murder, Martinez assured her. But understanding his motive helps build our case. Outside in the hallway, Wilson murmured, "You think she's telling the truth?" Martinez considered. "Yes, but I think Richard believed the test results, and for him that was enough justification." Back at the station, Martinez added the paternity angle to their case board. Richard Hartwell's actions now appeared even more calculated. A man who felt deceived, financially desperate, eliminating a child he believed wasn't his while setting. Up a financial windfall through insurance fraud. "One more piece," she told Wilson. "We need to find out who ordered that first paternity test. If Richard falsified it to create a motive for abandonment, that's premeditation on a whole new level," Wilson finished. "Making himself believe a lie to justify the unthinkable," Martinez nodded grimly. "Some people will tell themselves any story to become the hero of their own narrative, even when they're actually the villain." The church basement hummed with activity as volunteers prepared for the annual Christmas food drive. Marjorie Parker efficiently organized canned goods while Jamal assembled cardboard boxes, the rhythm of their work comfortable and familiar. "Ms. Reynolds says you're a local celebrity now," Marjorie remarked, eyeing her grandson. "Says the donation box has been overflowing since your picture hit the news." Jamal shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "I don't want to be famous." "For this, Grandma, fame finds you, whether you want it or not sometimes." She placed cans of corn in neat rows. "Question is what you do with it." A church volunteer approached them hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Jamal? The boy who saved that baby?" Before Jamal could respond, Marjorie stepped in. "He's working right now. Food drive serves 300 families. Needs his full attention." The volunteer retreated, but Jamal had grown used to these interruptions. At school, at the mall, even here in their church, people wanted to connect with the story that had captured the community's imagination. "I got called to the counselor's office today," Jamal said, folding another box. "Some reporter tried to get an interview by pretending to be a relative." Marjorie's expression darkened. "Vultures, all of them. Mr. Davis says the mall wants to give me an award." "At a ceremony with cameras." His grandmother paused her sorting. "And what do you want to do about that?" Jamal considered the question. "I don't want to seem ungrateful, but it feels wrong, making a big deal about doing the right thing." Marjorie nodded slowly, then checked her watch. "Take a break with me. There's something I want to tell you." They sat on a bench outside the church, the December air crisp but mild compared to the night of the storm. Marjorie pulled her cardigan tight around her shoulders. "Did I ever tell you about how I met your grandfather?" Jamal shook his head. "Grandpa." James had died before Jamal was born, and Marjorie rarely spoke of him. "I was 17, working as a maid in a hotel downtown. This was 1975, height of segregation ending, but attitudes still mighty slow to change." She gazed into the distance. "One night I was cleaning a room when the guest returned unexpectedly, a white businessman, drunk and angry about something." Jamal tensed, sensing where this story might be headed. "He got rough," Marjorie continued, her voice matter of fact. "Tore my uniform, said terrible things. I was trapped, and back then, who'd believe a black maid over a white guest?" She took a deep breath. "That's when your grandfather came in. He was working maintenance. Heard the commotion. He didn't hesitate, just pulled that man off me and stood between us. Cost him his job standing up for me like that." "Grandpa got fired for helping you?" Jamal asked, indignant. "Both of us did, but James said he'd do it again in a heartbeat." A small smile touched Marjorie's lips. "We were married 6 months later." She turned to face Jamal directly. "Your grandfather never got any recognition. No news stories, no awards. But that moment of courage changed my life. Saved it, maybe." Jamal absorbed this, understanding dawning. "So you're saying I should do the ceremony for Emma?" "I'm saying recognition doesn't matter. The act itself matters." Marjorie patted his hand. "But sometimes letting people celebrate good deeds reminds them that good still exists in this world. That's worth something, too." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her story settling between them. "There's something else bothering you," Marjorie observed. "I can always tell." Jamal hesitated, then admitted, "Some kids at school are saying I should get a reward. Money, you know?" From Emma's mom, since she's rich. He looked down, ashamed. One boy said I should sue for a percentage of the baby's trust fund. Marjorie's expression hardened. And what do you think about that? It feels wrong, Jamal said immediately, like putting a price on Emma's life. Good, Marjorie nodded firmly. Because the moment you take payment for doing the right thing, you cheapen it, make it a transaction, instead of an act of humanity. But we could use the money, Jamal said quietly, thinking of their struggling radiator, his too small winter coat, the constant calculations his grandmother made at the grocery store. Money comes and money goes, Marjorie replied. But who you are, that's forever. Your mother understood that. Your father, too, before the streets got hold of him. At the mention of his parents, Jamal felt the familiar ache of their absence. His father shot in a convenience store robbery when Jamal was 4. His mother fading away from grief and illness 2 years later. Detective Martinez asked if I'd be willing to testify, he said, changing the subject. If Richard Hartwell goes to trial, Marjorie studied him. That frightens you. It wasn't a question. Jamal nodded anyway. Speaking truth is never easy, she said, especially when powerful people don't want to hear it. But fear and courage always exist together, Jamal. Can't have one without the other. A church volunteer poked her head outside. Marjorie? The pastor's looking for the donation records. Be right there, Marjorie called back. She turned to Jamal. Think about what I've said, about your grandfather, about recognition, about fear. She stood adjusting her cardigan. Then make your own decisions. I'll support whatever you choose. As she walked back inside, Jamal remained on the bench considering her words. His grandmother rarely shared stories from her past, each one a precious gift carrying lessons she deemed essential. The sun emerged briefly from behind winter clouds, warming his face. In that moment, Jamal made 2 decisions. He would accept the mall's recognition, not for himself, but for what it represented. The community's need to celebrate something good amid so much darkness. And he would testify, no matter how intimidating the courtroom might be, because some things were worth being afraid for. Emma's face flashed in his mind, her solemn eyes, her tiny hand grasping his finger in the hospital. Some people were worth being brave for. The family court waiting area was hushed, despite being nearly full. Elaine sat rigid on a wooden bench, her attorney beside her reviewing documents. Across the room, a middle-aged couple, Emma's current foster parents, whispered to each other, occasionally glancing in Elaine's direction. 2 weeks had passed since Emma had been removed from Elaine's care. 2 weeks of supervised visits, parenting classes, psychological evaluations, and sleepless nights. The DNA results had confirmed what Elaine insisted all along. Emma was indeed Richard's biological child. The original test had been falsified. Another piece of Richard's elaborate plan. Remember, Elaine's attorney Samantha Walsh murmured, Judge Hernandez is fair but conservative regarding family reunification. She'll want concrete evidence that you've addressed the court's concerns. Elaine nodded mechanically. She'd rehearsed her responses, prepared for every question. The gold wedding band she'd worn for 4 years was conspicuously absent from her finger. The courtroom doors opened. Hartwell custody hearing, the bailiff announced. Elaine rose, smoothing her modest navy dress. A deliberate choice, worlds away from her usual designer wardrobe. Ms. Wilson from Child Protective Services entered from a side door, carrying a thick file. Behind her came Detective Martinez, who would testify about the ongoing criminal investigation. Judge Hernandez, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, called the hearing to order. This is a preliminary custody determination regarding Emma Grace. Hartwell, I've reviewed the case file and recommendations. I'll hear brief statements before making my decision. The CPS attorney went first, outlining the circumstances of Emma's abandonment and subsequent placement in emergency foster care. While Mrs. Hartwell appears to be a loving mother, serious concerns remain about her judgment and her awareness of her husband's intentions toward the child. Elaine flinched at these words but remained composed. The foster parent's attorney spoke next. The Millers have provided Emma with stability and loving care during this traumatic transition. They're prepared to continue as her long-term placement, if the court deems it necessary. Finally, Samantha Walsh rose. Your Honor, my client has fully cooperated with authorities, completed parenting classes, and established separate financial resources from her husband. The DNA testing confirms Emma is their biological child, and the evidence strongly indicates Mrs. Hartwell had no knowledge of her husband's criminal activities or his plans regarding their daughter. Judge Hernandez peered over her glasses. Mrs. Hartwell, please stand. Elaine rose, hands clasped tightly to stop their trembling. I have questions about your role as Emma's mother, the judge stated. Records indicate you frequently traveled without your daughter, leaving her in the care of hired help. Yes, Your Honor, Elaine admitted. I was often involved in charity events, many of which Richard insisted I attend for business networking. I now recognize I should have prioritized differently. And how did you not notice your husband's disturbing behavior toward your child? Elaine swallowed hard. Richard was controlling with our finances and business matters, but he always seemed devoted to Emma in my presence. I was blind to the signs, a failure I will regret forever. But I've ended all contact with him, filed for divorce, and am committed to creating a safe, stable home for my daughter. The judge studied her for a long moment. Detective Martinez, what is the status of the criminal investigation? Martinez approached the stand. Richard Hartwell remains in custody without bail. We've uncovered extensive evidence of financial fraud alongside the plot to abandon Emma for insurance money. We found no evidence Mrs. Hartwell was involved in or aware of these plans. In fact, she's been instrumental in helping us understand the timeline of Mr. Hartwell's actions. The hearing continued with testimony from Ms. Wilson, who reported on Elaine's compliance with CPS requirements and her progress in therapy. Mrs. Hartwell has demonstrated genuine commitment to addressing the court's concerns. She secured an apartment, enrolled in parenting classes, and established financial independence through family resources unconnected to her husband's assets. Next, the Millers testified about Emma's adjustment to their home. She's doing well, Mrs. Miller said, compassion in her voice, as she glanced at Elaine. But she does become very excited during her mother's visits. Finally, in a surprise move, the judge called Jamal Parker to the stand. He approached nervously, wearing his school's only dress shirt and tie. Young man, you found Emma Hartwell abandoned in the mall parking lot, correct? Yes, ma'am, Jamal replied. And you visited her regularly since then? When Mrs. Hartwell allows it, yes. What have you observed about their relationship? Jamal hesitated, then spoke with quiet certainty. Emma lights up when her mom comes in the room, and Mrs. Hartwell, she always talks to Emma, explains things to her, even though she's just a baby. They have a connection. You can see it. Thank you for your perspective, the judge said, a rare softness in her voice. You may step down. After a brief recess, Judge Hernandez delivered her ruling. This court must prioritize Emma's safety and well-being above all else. While I acknowledge the state's concerns, I also recognize the importance of the mother-child bond when not compromised by abuse or neglect. Elaine held her breath. I am ordering Emma returned to her mother's custody under the following conditions: continued CPS supervision for 6 months, weekly home visits, completion of the parenting program, and permanent separation of finances from Richard Hartwell. The Millers will serve as respite care providers twice monthly to maintain continuity for Emma during this transition. Tears spilled down Elaine's cheeks. Thank you, Your Honor. Mrs. Hartwell, the judge added firmly, this court is placing tremendous faith in you. Emma deserves a mother who will protect her fiercely. Be that mother. I will, Elaine promised, her voice steady despite her tears. Outside the courtroom, Ms. Wilson arranged for Emma to be brought from the nursery, where she'd been waiting during the hearing. When the social worker appeared with Emma in her arms, Elaine rushed forward. "Hello, my sweet girl," she whispered, gathering her daughter close. "We're going home." Emma babbled happily, patting her mother's tear-streaked face with curious fingers. Across the hallway, Jamal watched the reunion with quiet satisfaction before slipping away. unnoticed in the emotional aftermath of the hearing. His testimony had been brief but meaningful, a simple truth that even the formality of court proceedings couldn't diminish. Some bonds couldn't be broken, not by wealth or poverty, not by crime or punishment, not even by the coldest winter night. Richard Hartwell paced his prison cell, designer shoes replaced by institutional slippers, custom suit exchanged for an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. 3 weeks of incarceration had hollowed his cheeks and darkened the circles beneath his eyes. Without access to his hair products and personal grooming routine, he looked older, smaller, diminished. The morning's newspaper lay open on his cot, the business section featuring a detailed expose of Hartwell investments. Collapse. Former clients were quoted expressing shock and betrayal. The SEC investigation had uncovered a scheme spanning years, affecting hundreds of investors. His name, once synonymous with financial brilliance, was now paired with words like fraud, embezzlement, and sociopath. A guard appeared at his cell. "Hartwell, your attorney's here." In the visitation room, Elizabeth Vaughn waited, her expression grim. She had been Richard's lawyer for a decade, helping him navigate complex business deals and regulatory challenges. Now, she was attempting to keep him from spending the rest of his life in prison. "They've added new charges," she informed him without preamble. "Wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. The DA believes they have enough evidence to prove you intended to collect on Emma's life insurance policy." Richard's face remained impassive. "What about the falsified paternity test?" "They've traced it to a lab technician who admits you paid him to alter the results." Vaughn's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "Richard, why? You had to know. A second test would reveal the truth." "I needed to believe she wasn't mine," he replied coldly. It made things simpler. Vaughn stared at him, truly seeing her client for perhaps the first time. "The prosecution has offered a plea deal, 25 years with possibility of parole after 15, in exchange for a full confession and cooperation in recovering investor assets." "Unacceptable," Richard snapped. "I'd be 60 before I saw freedom. Counter with 15, parole after 7. "They won't take it," Vaughn warned. "The evidence against you is overwhelming, and public sentiment is extremely negative. If this goes to trial, you're looking at 40 to life." Richard leaned forward, desperation bleeding through his controlled facade. "Then find another way. That's what I pay you for." "You haven't paid me in 3 months," Vaughn reminded him. "I'm considering withdrawing as counsel." Panic flashed across Richard's face. "You can't abandon me now, like you abandoned your daughter?" The words escaped before Vaughn could stop them. She gathered her papers, regaining her professional composure. "I'll convey your counteroffer, but don't expect much. The DA is under enormous pressure to make an example of you." After she left, Richard was returned to his cell. He sat on the edge of his cot, head in his hands. Everything was unraveling faster than he had anticipated. His emergency escape plan, the offshore accounts, the fake passport, the yacht waiting in the Caymans, all useless now. An hour later, the guard returned. "You've got another visitor?" Richard looked up, surprised. "My attorney again?" "No," says, "she's your wife." Elaine sat rigid on the other side of the glass partition, her face a composed mask. Richard noted with irritation that prison visitation wasn't aging her the way it was him. If anything, she looked stronger, more focused than he remembered. He picked up the phone. "Come to gloat?" "I came to tell you I'm divorcing you," Elaine replied evenly. "The papers have been filed." "You'll get nothing," Richard warned. "Everything's frozen or seized." A cold smile touched Elaine's lips. "I don't want your money, Richard. I just want freedom from you, for myself and for Emma." At their daughter's name, Richard flinched slightly. The trust fund was empty. "I know." Elaine leaned forward. "I know everything now. The affair with your secretary, the gambling debts, the investors you ruined, and your plan for our daughter." Richard's face hardened. She would have been found eventually. In time? In that storm? Elaine's composure cracked, rage bleeding through. "She could have died, Richard. Our baby. Not mine, he replied automatically. She is yours. The DNA test confirms it. Elaine watched his reaction closely. You paid to have the results falsified. You created a lie to justify the unthinkable. For a moment, Richard's mask slipped, genuine confusion crossing his features. Then his eyes narrowed. Another mistake in a long line of them, starting with marrying you. Elaine shook her head slowly. I used to wonder what I did wrong, how I failed to see the monster behind the man. Now I realize there was never a man at all, just a hollow shell filled with greed and ego. Richard laughed, a brittle sound. Save the amateur psychology for your therapy sessions. You're just as guilty as I am, living off my money, enjoying the lifestyle, asking no questions. You're right. The simple admission seemed to surprise him. I was willfully blind, too focused on the perfect life I thought we were building. I'll regret that forever. She stood up. But I'm done now. The police have my full cooperation. I've identified assets you've hidden, connections you've used. Your former partners are turning on you one by one. Richard's knuckles whitened around the phone. You vindictive bitch. Goodbye, Richard. Elaine placed the phone in its cradle and turned to leave. Wait, Richard called, forgetting she couldn't hear him through the glass. He banged his palm against the partition, drawing sharp looks from the guards. Elaine paused, then deliberately turned back. She didn't pick up the phone, just looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. What she saw prompted not anger, but something worse, pity. Then she walked away, her steps growing more confident with each foot of distance she put between them. That evening, Richard's lawyer called with news. His bail hearing appeal had been denied. The offshore accounts had been located and frozen. And most devastating of all, his former business partner had accepted immunity in exchange for detailed testimony about Richard's financial crimes. It's over, Vaughn told him bluntly. Take the plea deal. It's the best outcome you can hope for now. Alone in his cell that night, Richard finally confronted the truth he'd been evading. There would be no escape, no triumphant return, no restoration of his former glory. The life he had built, the power he had wielded, the respect he had commanded, all gone. And somewhere across the city, the child who shared his DNA, the daughter he had abandoned to die, slept safely in her mother's arms, her future now blessedly free of his influence. Ridgeview Mall's center court had been transformed. Holiday decorations twinkled overhead, and a small stage had been erected beside the fountain. Rows of folding chairs filled quickly as community members gathered for what the local newspaper had dubbed the Emma Hartwell Benefit. Jamal tugged uncomfortably at his borrowed tie. Do I really have to go up there, Grandma? Marjorie adjusted the knot with practiced hands. Just for a minute. Say thank you, then you can sit back down with me. The mall's general manager approached, all smiles and nervous energy. Almost ready, Jamal? We've got the mayor, the chief of police, and several news crews waiting. Yes, sir, Jamal replied politely, though his stomach churned. In the month since Emma's abandonment, the story had evolved from local news to national human interest piece. What began as a simple recognition ceremony had grown into a community fundraiser, with proceeds dedicated to a trust fund for Emma's future education. Jamal scanned the crowd, spotting familiar faces, his teachers, classmates, fellow mall employees. Mr. Davis had given everyone the night off to attend, closing the maintenance department early. Even Detective Martinez was present, standing at the back with her partner. A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience as Elaine arrived with Emma in her arms. No longer staying at the hotel, they now lived in a modest apartment across town, far from the mansion that was being sold as part of Richard's asset liquidation. Elaine wore a simple dress rather than designer labels, her only jewelry, a small pendant around her neck. Places everyone, the manager called, ushering dignitaries onto the stage. The ceremony began with speeches about community spirit and holiday miracles. The mayor praised Ridgeview's culture of compassion. The mall's corporate owner announced a substantial donation to the Emma Hartwell Education Fund. A local banker detailed how the trust would be managed until Emma reached college. age. Then came Jamal's moment. The mall manager introduced him with glowing superlatives: heroic young man, exceptional character, embodiment of selflessness. Jamal walked to the podium, acutely aware of the cameras and expectant faces. "I don't have much to say," he began quietly. "I just did what anyone would do. Emma needed help, and I was there." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My grandmother always taught me that we're responsible for each other." That's all I was thinking about that night. From the front row, Marjorie nodded encouragingly. "Thank you for this recognition," Jamal continued. "But the real focus should be on Emma and her future. I'm glad our community has come together to support her." He stepped back from the podium to warm applause, relief washing over him as he returned to his seat. Next, Elaine approached the microphone. Emma balanced on her hip. The baby wore a red velvet dress with tiny patent leather shoes, her eyes wide as she surveyed the crowd. "Words cannot express my gratitude to Jamal Parker," Elaine began, her voice steady despite the emotion visible on her face. "His actions that night saved my daughter's life, and I will be forever in his debt." She turned slightly to address Jamal directly. "You showed more humanity in one moment than many people demonstrate in a lifetime. You've inspired me to be a better person, a better mother." Facing the audience again, Elaine continued, "The fund established today will ensure Emma receives the education she deserves. But I've also started a second initiative." She gestured to a representative from the community college who stood and waved. "The Jamal Parker Scholarship will provide full tuition to one deserving student each year, beginning with Jamal himself when he graduates high school." Surprised murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marjorie gasped softly beside Jamal, her hand finding his and squeezing tight. "Education changed my life," Elaine explained. "It can change others too. This scholarship honors the young man who taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in decency and courage." The announcement received a standing ovation. Jamal sat stunned, unable to process what he'd just heard. College had always been a distant dream, something he and his grandmother discussed, but never quite believed would be financially possible. After the ceremony, well-wishers surrounded Jamal. His principal beamed with pride. Classmates who had previously ignored him suddenly wanted photos together. Local business owners pressed business cards into his hand, offering part-time jobs with flexible hours and better pay than the mall. "Don't let it go to your head," Marjorie murmured, as another stranger asked for a selfie with Jamal. "No chance of that," he assured her. "Not with you around." Eventually, the crowd thinned. Jamal found a quiet moment to approach Elaine, who stood near the fountain with Emma. "Mrs. Hartwell," he began awkwardly, "thank you for the scholarship. You didn't have to do that." "Please, call me Elaine," she replied. "And yes, I did have to do it. It's the least I could do." Emma, recognizing Jamal, reached out her small hands toward him. Without thinking, he held out his arms, and Elaine transferred the baby to him. Emma immediately grabbed his ear, a favorite game during his hospital visits. "She remembers you," Elaine observed with a smile. "We've got a connection," Jamal agreed, gently disentangling Emma's fingers from his earlobe. From that first night, Marjorie joined them, her initial wariness toward Elaine having softened over the weeks. "That's a generous thing you've done for my grandson, Mrs. Hartwell." "Education is the one gift that can never be taken away," Elaine replied. "My parents taught me that before they passed. It seems right to pass that lesson forward." As they talked, Detective Martinez approached with an update on the case. Richard had accepted a plea deal, 20 years with possibility of parole after 12, avoiding a trial that would have further traumatized all involved. "It's really over," Elaine said quietly when Martinez had gone. "We can finally move forward." Marjorie nodded approvingly. "That's the only direction worth moving, child. Forward." As the event concluded, Jamal found himself at the exact spot where he'd first discovered Emma 1 month earlier. The parking lot was peaceful now, no desperate cries piercing the night, no abandoned baby fighting for survival in the cold. Instead, there was hope for Emma's future, secured by a community that had rallied around her. For Elaine, finding strength she hadn't known she possessed. And for Jamal himself, whose simple act of human decency had opened doors he'd never imagined possible. Despite Richard Hartwell's plea agreement, the judge insisted on formal proceedings before accepting the deal. The courthouse steps teemed with reporters and curious onlookers as Jamal and Marjorie made their way inside, guided by a court officer, through a side entrance to avoid the media. The courtroom's polished wood and solemn atmosphere intimidated Jamal. He'd practiced his testimony with Detective Martinez, but sitting in the witness waiting room, his confidence wavered. Through the door, he could hear the prosecutor's opening statement, laying out the horrific details of Richard's actions and the broader financial crimes that had motivated them. "You doing okay?" Marjorie asked, straightening his tie for the dozenth time that morning. Jamal nodded, though his mouth felt dry. "Just want to get it over with." In the main courtroom, Richard Hartwell sat beside his attorney, impeccably dressed despite his incarceration. His expression remained impassive. As the prosecutor described his calculated plot to eliminate his own child for financial gain, only the slightest tightening around his eyes betrayed any emotion. Elaine occupied the front row of the gallery, her posture rigid, gaze fixed forward. Emma was not present, spared the proceedings by her young age. Behind Elaine sat several former clients of Hartwell Investments, their faces etched with the anger of those betrayed by someone they had trusted. The prosecution called their first witness, the lab technician who had falsified the paternity test at Richard's request. He testified nervously, explaining how Richard had paid him $25,000 in cash to alter the results. "He told me it was just to get leverage in his divorce," the technician explained, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I never imagined he'd try to harm the baby." The defense attempted to paint the technician as an unreliable witness with a history of financial problems, but the damage was done. Next came Richard's former business partner, who detailed years of financial manipulation and fraud. "Richard became increasingly desperate last fall," the partner testified. "He knew the SEC investigation was closing in. He needed a large cash infusion to cover the missing investor funds before the annual audit. The prosecution displayed the life insurance policy Richard had taken out on Emma just 6 weeks before the abandonment. The policy included a double indemnity clause for accidental death, which would have paid $10 million, enough to temporarily plug the holes in his financial scheme. The defendant's plan was elegant in its simplicity. The prosecutor told the jury, abandon his infant daughter in freezing temperatures where she would likely die of exposure. The death would appear accidental, the insurance would pay out, and his financial problems would be temporarily solved. By mid-afternoon, it was Jamal's turn to testify. He entered the courtroom with his chin up, focusing on Detective Martinez's encouraging nod rather than the jury's curious stares or the reporter's scribbling notes. After establishing the basic facts of Jamal's employment and presence at the mall that evening, the prosecutor asked him to describe finding Emma. "I heard crying," Jamal said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "At first I thought it was just the wind, but then I realized it was coming from between 2 parked cars. When I got closer, I saw the baby carrier." "What condition was the infant?" "And when you found her, she was crying really hard. Her face was red, and she felt cold when I touched her hand. The blanket had partly come off." "What did you do next?" Jamal recounted his actions, adjusting the blanket, deciding to seek help rather than leave Emma alone, carrying the carrier to the mall entrance, encountering the security guard. "How long do you estimate the baby had been outside?" "I'm not sure. But it had been snowing for about an hour, and there was snow collected on parts of the carrier." The prosecutor played the security footage, showing Richard placing the carrier between the cars, looking directly at the camera, then walking away. Jamal identified the location as the same spot where he had found Emma approximately 40 minutes later, according to the timestamp. "In your estimation," the prosecutor asked, What would have happened if you hadn't found the baby when you did? Objection, Richard's attorney called. Calls for speculation. Sustained, the judge ruled. The prosecutor rephrased, based on the weather conditions that night, were you concerned for the baby's welfare? Yes, sir, Jamal replied. It was very cold, below freezing. The wind was strong. She was already cold when I found her, and it was getting colder as the night went on. During cross-examination, Richard's attorney tried a different approach. You've received considerable attention since that night, haven't you, Jamal? News interviews, a scholarship, recognition from the mayor? I didn't ask for any of that, Jamal replied evenly. But you've benefited from your involvement in this case, correct? Jamal met the attorney's gaze. I did what anyone should have done. The rest wasn't up to me. No further questions, the attorney conceded, recognizing the futility of trying to undermine the teenager's credibility. As Jamal stepped down from the witness stand, he briefly made eye contact with Richard Hartwell. The man's cold stare held no remorse, no gratitude for the life Jamal had saved, only calculation, as if already plotting his next move despite the inevitability of his sentence. The final witness was Detective Martinez, who methodically laid out the financial evidence connecting Richard's desperate monetary situation to his plot against Emma. When she described finding the falsified paternity test emails, several jurors visibly recoiled. The defendant created a fiction that his daughter wasn't biologically his to justify his actions to himself, Martinez testified. When that fiction was exposed by legitimate DNA testing, he simply incorporated it into his defense strategy. By late afternoon, the prosecution rested its case. The defense, recognizing the overwhelming evidence, kept their presentation brief, focusing on Richard's previously unblemished legal record and contributions to various charities. The judge then addressed Richard directly. Mr. Hartwell, before I accept your plea agreement, I want to hear from you. Do you understand the charges against you and the terms of this agreement? Richard stood, straightening his custom suit jacket. I do, Your Honor. And you admit to the acts described by the prosecution? A moment's hesitation then. Yes, Your Honor. Very well. This court accepts your guilty plea. Sentencing will proceed tomorrow morning. As Richard was led away by court officers, his gaze swept the courtroom one last time. He looked not at Elaine or the former clients he had ruined, but at Jamal, the unexpected variable in his carefully calculated plan, the janitor's son whose simple act of human decency had unraveled everything. Snow fell gently outside Marjorie Parker's apartment window, nothing like the bitter storm of that fateful December night, but enough to dust the neighborhood with a clean white blanket. In the small kitchen, Marjorie measured flour for biscuits, her movements precise and practiced. The doorbell rang, an unusual occurrence on a Saturday morning. "Jamal," she called toward his bedroom, "you expecting someone?" "No, ma'am," he replied, emerging with a textbook in hand. Since the trial's conclusion, 3 weeks earlier, life had gradually returned to normal. School, work, homework, church. The media attention had finally subsided, much to their relief. Marjorie wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door to find Elaine Hartwell standing in the hallway, Emma bundled in a carrier at her feet. "Mrs. Hartwell," Marjorie said, surprise evident in her voice, "this is unexpected." "I apologize for not calling first," Elaine replied, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I was hoping to speak with you, both of you actually." Marjorie hesitated only briefly before stepping back. "Come in then. I've got biscuits in the oven." Jamal appeared from his room, his face lighting up at the sight of Emma. "Hey there, little one," he said, crouching to peer into the carrier. The baby gurgled happily in response, recognizing her rescuer. The apartment, though modest, was immaculate and warmly decorated with family photos and handmade quilts. Elaine took in the space with genuine interest rather than the condescension Marjorie had half expected. "Please sit," Marjorie offered, gesturing to the small dining table. "Coffee? That would be lovely, thank you." An awkward silence settled as Marjorie busied herself with cups and saucers. Despite their shared experience through the trial and ceremony. This was the first time Elaine had visited their home, crossing the invisible but palpable boundary between their worlds. The sentencing was yesterday, Elaine said finally. 20 years, just as the plea agreement specified. Marjorie nodded, setting coffee before her guest. We saw on the news. I thought I'd feel something, Elaine continued, staring into her cup. Relief, closure, something. But I just felt empty. Neither Marjorie nor Jamal responded, sensing she had more to say. The mansion is sold. Most of the assets liquidated for restitution to Richard's victims. Elaine's fingers traced the edge of her saucer. It's strange. I should mourn that life, but I don't. It never felt truly mine. And now? Marjorie asked, her tone neutral. Now I'm starting over. We're starting over, Elaine corrected, glancing at Emma. That's partly why I'm here. I need advice. Marjorie raised an eyebrow. From us? Yes. Elaine met her gaze directly. You raised Jamal alone after your daughter passed. He's turned out to be an extraordinary young man. I want to do right by Emma, and I have no idea how. The frankness of the admission caught Marjorie off guard. She had expected many things from Elaine Hartwell, condescension, perhaps, or the noblesse oblige of the wealthy toward the less fortunate. Not this raw vulnerability. Raising a child isn't something I can explain over coffee, Marjorie said finally. It's a day-by-day journey. I understand that, Elaine nodded, but I have no reference point. My own mother was distant, more concerned with appearances than connection. I don't want that for Emma. Jamal, who had been quietly playing with Emma on the living room floor, looked up. You already care more than my dad ever did. That's a start. His grandmother shot him a warning look, but Elaine smiled sadly. Thank you for that, Jamal. But caring isn't enough. I need skills, knowledge. She turned back to Marjorie. The parenting. Classes CPS required were helpful, but basic. I need real-world wisdom. Marjorie studied the younger woman thoughtfully. The Elaine before her bore little resemblance to the polished socialite from the news photos. Her clothes simpler, her manner more genuine. The hungry way she watched Jamal interact with Emma spoke volumes. Why me? Marjorie asked finally. Surely you have friends, other mothers you could turn to? Former friends, Elaine corrected. Most disappeared when the scandal broke. The rest, when my bank account emptied, she squared her shoulders. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because you raised a child who, at 13, showed more character than most adults I know. That doesn't happen by accident. The timer dinged, and Marjorie rose to remove the biscuits from the oven. As she worked, she considered Elaine's words. There was no denying the genuine need in the younger woman's voice, the determination to do better for her child. Eat while they're hot, Marjorie said, placing the basket of biscuits on the table. Food first, then we'll talk. Relief washed over Elaine's face as she accepted the simple offering. Not just food, but the beginning of something, a connection, maybe even, eventually, guidance. As they ate, the initial awkwardness gradually dissolved. Elaine shared her plans to take accounting courses at the community college, building on skills from her brief pre-ballet career. Marjorie, it turned out, had worked as a bookkeeper before becoming a nurse's aide. Their conversation found unexpected common ground. Emma, meanwhile, had fallen asleep on a blanket Jamal spread on the living room floor, her tiny hand wrapped around his finger, even in slumber. She trusts him completely, Elaine observed softly, from that very first night. Children know, Marjorie replied. They sense who sees them truly and who doesn't. A pointed remark that could have been cutting, but was delivered with a gentleness that acknowledged Elaine's efforts to change. I'd like to learn that, how to truly see her, Elaine said, to understand what she needs beyond the obvious. Marjorie regarded her thoughtfully. It starts with listening, not just with your ears, but with your whole self. Listening to what they say and don't say, watching how they move through the world. Will you show me? Elaine asked, the question both humble and brave. The older woman's expression softened slightly. I'm not promising friendship, Mrs. Hartwell. We come from different worlds. Elaine, please, she insisted. And those different worlds might be Exactly why I need your perspective. Marjorie considered this, then nodded slowly. Sunday dinners, we have them after church each week. You and Emma are welcome to join us. We can start there. It was a small offering, but a genuine one. Elaine accepted it with gratitude evident in her eyes. As she prepared to leave, Emma bundled back into her carrier. Elaine paused in the doorway. Thank you, not just for today, but for raising Jamal to be who he is. Emma and I owe him everything. You don't owe us anything, Marjorie corrected firmly, but you do owe that child your best self. That's payment enough. Elaine nodded, understanding the contract being offered, not friendship based on social obligation or charity, but a relationship grounded in mutual respect and the shared commitment to raising children well. It wasn't what either woman had expected, but perhaps it was exactly what both needed. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Reynolds entered for the sentencing hearing. 3 months had passed since Richard Hartwell's guilty plea, a period during which the court had received victim impact statements from former clients, reviewed psychiatric evaluations, and considered sentencing recommendations from both prosecution and defense. Richard sat at the defense table, his once impeccable appearance now showing subtle signs of strain, a slightly ill-fitting suit, hair graying. At the temples, the confident posture diminished. Beside him, his attorney maintained a professional demeanor despite the case's inevitable outcome. The gallery was full. Financial victims occupied one section, their faces bearing the strain of lost retirements and shattered dreams. Reporters filled another area, pens poised to capture the final chapter of a scandal that had captivated the public. Detective Martinez sat with the prosecution team, her case file closed, her work complete. In the back row, Elaine watched quietly, a study in dignified composure. Jamal sat beside her, having insisted on attending despite Marjorie's concern. About missing school, his presence was a silent testament to the human cost of Richard's actions, not just financial, but deeply personal. Before I pronounce sentence, Judge Reynolds began, adjusting his glasses, I'll hear impact statements from those most directly affected by the defendant's actions. First came representatives from the defrauded investors, a retired teacher whose savings had vanished, a widower who had trusted Richard with his late wife's life insurance. Their statements blended together variations on a theme of betrayal and financial ruin. Then, the prosecutor called Elaine to the podium. She approached slowly, dressed simply but elegantly, her statement prepared, but her hands trembling slightly as she placed it before her. Your Honor, she began, her voice clear despite her evident emotion. I was married to Richard Hartwell for 4 years. During that time, I believed I knew the man I had married, ambitious, yes, but also someone I thought cared about building a family, about our daughter Emma. She paused, steadying herself. I was wrong. The man I married was a fiction, a carefully constructed facade hiding someone capable of abandoning his own child to die alone in the cold. Someone who created false evidence to convince himself she wasn't his daughter, making it easier to leave her in that parking lot. Richard stared straight ahead, his expression impassive. Emma survived, thanks to the extraordinary kindness of a young man who happened to find her. She's thriving now, growing and changing every day. But she will always carry this with her, the knowledge that her father chose money over her life. Elaine looked directly at Richard for the first time. I don't speak today seeking vengeance. I speak for Emma, who cannot speak for herself, for the trauma she experienced that night, for her future questions that will have no satisfactory answers. Her voice grew stronger. I ask the court to ensure that Richard serves his full sentence without early parole, not out of hatred, but because a man capable of such calculated cruelty toward his own infant daughter presents a danger that society must be protected from. She returned to her seat, composed but visibly relieved to have completed her statement. Would anyone else like to speak? The judge inquired. To everyone's surprise, Jamal raised his hand. After a quick, whispered exchange with Elaine, he approached, the podium suddenly seeming much younger in the formal setting. I'm Jamal Parker, he began. I'm the person who found Emma that night. The judge nodded encouragingly. Go ahead, young man. I just wanted to say. Jamal hesitated, gathering his thoughts. When I found Emma, she was cold and scared, but she was fighting. She wasn't giving up. Even though she was just a baby, she was trying so hard to survive. His simple words carried a powerful impact in the hushed courtroom. I think about her a lot, he continued. About what would have happened if I'd taken my break earlier, or if I'd gone home on time instead of staying late. She might not be here, and that wasn't an accident. Someone made a choice that could have ended her life. He looked at Richard, not with anger, but with genuine confusion. I don't understand how anyone could do that. I just wanted the court to know that Emma deserved better. She still does. After Jamal returned to his seat, Richard was offered the opportunity to speak. He stood slowly, buttoning his jacket in a gesture reminiscent of his former corporate confidence. Your Honor, he began, his voice showing none of the emotion displayed by previous speakers. I accept responsibility for my actions. The financial pressures I faced do not excuse what I did. I recognize the harm I've caused to my investors, to my family, and to the financial community that trusted me. Not once did he mention Emma by name. Not once did he express remorse specifically for abandoning his daughter. His statement was clinical, focused primarily on his financial crimes rather than the attempted murder that had shocked the community. Judge Reynolds listened impassively, then took several minutes to review his notes before delivering the sentence. Richard Hartwell, he began, this court has rarely seen a case that combines such calculated financial predation with such cold-blooded personal betrayal. You systematically defrauded investors who trusted you with their life savings. Then, when your schemes began to collapse, you attempted to solve your problems by abandoning your infant daughter to die of exposure. The judge removed his glasses, fixing Richard with a direct stare. The psychiatric evaluations submitted to this court suggest you exhibit significant sociopathic tendencies, an inability to empathize with others, a willingness to sacrifice anyone and anything for your own benefit. This makes you not only a criminal, but a danger to society. He replaced his glasses, consulting the documents before him. Therefore, this court sentences you to 20 years imprisonment for the financial crimes to which you have pleaded guilty, and an additional 10 years for child endangerment and attempted murder to be served consecutively. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Furthermore, the judge continued, you will be required to make restitution to your victims to the fullest extent possible through the liquidation of all remaining assets. You will have no contact with your daughter, Emma Hartwell, until she reaches the age of 18, at which point any contact will be at her sole discretion. The gavel fell with finality. Court is adjourned. As Richard was led away by court officers, he finally turned toward the gallery, his eyes seeking not Elaine, but Jamal, the unexpected variable who had disrupted his carefully calculated plan. Their gazes locked briefly, Richard's cold and assessing, Jamal's steady and unflinching. Then, Richard was gone, led through a side door to begin serving his 30-year sentence. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Elaine declined to speak, but placed a protective arm around Jamal's shoulders as they navigated the crowd. The gesture was not lost on the observers. The wealthy ballet dancer and the janitor's son, united by the life of a child they had each, in their own way, helped to save. 6 months later, summer sunshine warmed the community garden where Elaine knelt beside Emma, guiding the toddler's hands as they patted soil around a tomato seedling. At 14 months, Emma was walking unsteadily, her vocabulary growing daily, her personality emerging in flashes of determination and curiosity. Gentle, sweetie, Elaine murmured as Emma enthusiastically smacked the dirt. Like this? From the next plot over, Marjorie observed with a knowing smile. She's got your stubbornness. Is that a compliment or a warning? Elaine laughed, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Both, Marjorie replied, expertly tying up a cucumber vine. Strong-willed children become strong-willed adults. That's not always easy, but it's not bad either. In the month since Richard's sentencing, an unlikely friendship had developed between the two women. It began with those Sunday dinners. Elaine, initially stiff and uncertain in Marjorie's kitchen, gradually relaxing as she found herself welcomed without judgment. Marjorie's straightforward advice about childcare proved invaluable, while Elaine's determination to build a new life impressed the older woman more than she would readily admit. When Marjorie mentioned the community garden had a vacant plot, Elaine surprised her by immediately signing up, despite having never grown so much as a houseplant in her previous life. "I want Emma to know where food comes from," she'd explained, "to understand the value of creating rather than just consuming." Now their neighboring garden plots flourished under the summer sun, a visible symbol of their parallel journeys of growth and renewal. "Jamal's running late," Marjorie noted, checking her watch. "Summer school must have gone over." "The robotics project?" Elaine asked, retrieving Emma as she toddled dangerously close to a tomato cage. Teacher says he's got a real gift for engineering." Pride warmed Marjorie's voice. "Scholarship's already paying dividends." The Jamal Parker Scholarship had funded not only his future college education, but also summer enrichment programs that had opened new possibilities for the thoughtful teenager. His grades, always solid, had improved dramatically with access to additional resources and opportunities. A familiar figure appeared at the garden entrance, Jamal, backpack slung over one shoulder, waving as he spotted them. "Jam," Emma called out, her face lighting up as she squirmed to be put down. The nickname had emerged during her early attempts at speech, and it had stuck. Jamal jogged over, crouching down to greet Emma at her level. "Hey, Trouble," he said affectionately as she barrel-hugged his knees. "Been helping your mom with the, plants?" "Plants," Emma agreed enthusiastically, patting the soil again with chubby hands. "How was your project presentation?" Elaine asked, offering him a bottle of water from the cooler. "Got an A," Jamal replied, trying and failing to suppress his grin. "Mr. Reeves said it was the most innovative design he's seen from a freshman." "That's my boy," Marjorie beamed, removing her gardening gloves to give him a quick hug. "Always knew you had it in you." After helping harvest some early summer squash and radishes, they packed up their garden tools. Thursday evenings had become their regular dinner gathering, alternating between Marjorie's apartment and Elaine's small but comfortable townhouse, a far cry from the mansion, but somehow more of a home than that showcase had ever been. "I have news," Elaine announced as they walked to the parking lot. "The adoption proceedings are finally complete. Officially and legally, Emma is mine alone." Though Richard had never contested the termination of his parental rights, likely seeing it as one less obligation, the legal process had been lengthy and complex, given the unusual circumstances. "That calls for a celebration," Marjorie declared. "I'll make my special peach cobbler to go with dinner." At Elaine's townhouse, the evening unfolded with the comfortable rhythm they had established over months of shared meals. Jamal entertained Emma while the women prepared dinner, Marjorie teaching Elaine the finer points of her fried chicken recipe. "Never could get my Lynette to cook," Marjorie remarked, referring to Jamal's mother. "Said she was too busy with her studies. Smart as a whip, that girl." "Like Jamal," Elaine observed, carefully turning chicken pieces in sizzling oil the way Marjorie had shown her. "Got his brains from his mama, that's for sure," Marjorie agreed. "His heart, too." After dinner, as Emma played with blocks on the living room floor, Elaine brought out a small cake decorated with a single candle. "What's the occasion?" Jamal asked. "Emma's birthday isn't until November. This is for all of us," Elaine explained. "For new beginnings." She lit the candle, its warm glow illuminating their faces. "6 months ago I was lost. My marriage was revealed as a sham, my husband a criminal, my life as I knew it over. I had no idea how to be a single mother or how to build a life without all the trappings I was used to." Her gaze moved from Marjorie to Jamal. "You two showed me what real family looks like. Not the perfect image I was trying to project before, but something real. Something solid." Emma toddled over, attracted by the candle's flame. Jamal lifted her gently so she could see without getting too close. "I've been taking those accounting classes," Elaine continued, "and I've been offered a position at the Community Foundation. It's entry level, but it's a start, a real start. You've worked hard," Marjorie acknowledged. "Harder than I expected, if I'm being honest." Elaine smiled at the backhanded compliment, knowing it represented significant progress in their relationship. "I had good teachers. What are we wishing for?" Jamal asked, nodding toward the candle. "I think we've already got what we need," Marjorie replied, watching Emma reach curiously for the flickering light. Family, purpose, a future. Together they blew out the candle, Emma's delighted laughter filling the room as darkness briefly enveloped them before Elaine switched on the lamps. Outside, the summer evening settled around the townhouse, so different from the bitter winter night that had brought them together, yet connected to it by an unbreakable thread of chance, choice, and consequence. The story that had begun with abandonment was transforming one day at a time into something else entirely, a story of finding, of keeping, of belonging. 1 year to the day after Emma's abandonment, snowflakes drifted lazily from a steel-gray sky. The Ridgeview Mall parking lot was crowded with holiday shoppers, the atmosphere festive despite the cold. Jamal, now 14, stood at the exact spot where he'd found Emma, a small bronze plaque newly installed in the pavement marking the location. It had been the mall management's idea, a permanent reminder of how a simple act of kindness had changed multiple lives. "You okay?" Marjorie asked, adjusting her scarf against the winter chill. Jamal nodded, brushing snow from the plaque's surface. The inscription was simple. On this spot, December 18th, a child was saved and a community found its heart. "Seems like longer than a year ago," he reflected. "Some experiences do that," his grandmother replied. "They divide your life into before and after." From across the lot, Elaine approached with Emma bundled in a red snowsuit, her little face just visible within the fur-trimmed hood. At 2 years old, Emma was a whirlwind of energy and language, her vocabulary expanding daily, her personality blossoming under the steady nurturing that Elaine, with Marjorie's guidance, had learned to provide. "Sorry." "We're late," Elaine called. Someone decided her favorite stuffed dog absolutely had to come along. Emma clutched the worn toy, the same one Jamal had given her in the hospital a year earlier, now well-loved and slightly ragged. "Dog!" Emma announced proudly, holding it up for Jamal to see. "I remember," he smiled, crouching to her level. "You've taken good care of him." They made their way inside the mall, where a small ceremony awaited. The scholarship established in Jamal's name had expanded, now supporting 3 students with potential careers in emergency services or social work. The Emma Hartwell Fund had grown as well, providing emergency support for children in crisis. What had begun as a tragedy had transformed into something unexpected, a catalyst for positive change that rippled outward through their community. The mall's center court was decorated for Christmas, a towering tree glittering with lights. At its base, wrapped gifts collected for a children's charity awaited distribution. The mall manager welcomed them warmly, ushering them to reserved seats near a small podium. "Hard to believe it's been a year," he remarked. "So much has changed." Indeed, it had. Elaine, once the socialite wife of a prominent financier, now worked full-time at the Community Foundation, her natural grace and social connections repurposed to connect donors with worthy causes. Her accounting classes had given her financial independence, while Marjorie's friendship had provided something equally valuable, practical wisdom about raising a child alone. Jamal had flourished academically, his newfound access to educational resources revealing talents that might otherwise have remained dormant. The school counselor was already discussing college options, his future expanding beyond what he'd once imagined possible. Richard Hartwell remained in prison, his appeals denied, his name fading from public consciousness as new scandals took his place in the news cycle. Elaine had received one letter from him, which she had read once and then burned, refusing to allow his manipulations back into her life. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. The mayor spoke about community resilience, the mall manager about corporate responsibility, and a representative from Child Protective Services about the importance of looking out for vulnerable children. Jamal, asked to say a few words, approached the podium hesitantly. Public speaking still made him nervous, despite the confidence he'd gained in other areas. "A year ago today," he began, "I was just doing my job. I wasn't looking to be a hero or change anyone's life. I just heard a baby crying and did what I hope anyone would do." He glanced at Emma, who was contentedly playing with her stuffed dog in Elaine's lap. But that moment changed everything. Not just for Emma, but for me too. It showed me that sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones that seem obvious at the time. From the audience, Marjorie nodded encouragingly. "My grandmother always taught me that we're responsible for each other," Jamal continued, "that we're connected, even to strangers. I didn't really understand what she meant until that night in the parking lot." After the ceremony, they gathered at a nearby restaurant. For lunch, a celebration of survival and new beginnings. Emma, permitted to slide out of her high chair, toddled between tables, charming waitstaff and diners alike with her exuberant energy. "She has no idea," Elaine observed, watching her daughter, "how close she came to a completely different fate." "That's as it should be," Marjorie replied. "Children deserve innocence. They'll learn about the world's darkness soon enough." After lunch, they returned to the parking lot. The snow had stopped, weak winter sunlight breaking through the clouds. Elaine knelt beside Emma, pointing to the bronze plaque. "This is a special place," she explained simply. "This is where Jamal found you and brought you back to me." Emma, too young to understand the full significance, patted the medal curiously. "Cold," she declared. "Yes, it was very cold that night," Elaine agreed, her voice catching slightly. "But not anymore." They walked together toward their cars, Jamal automatically reaching for Emma's small hand as they navigated the busy parking lot. She grasped his fingers with complete trust, swinging their joined hands as she chattered about the Christmas tree and the dog and the snow, her world full of wonder and joy, unmarked by the trauma that could have defined her. At their vehicles, Elaine surprised Jamal with a small wrapped package. "Just a little something to mark the day," she explained. Inside was a framed photograph of Jamal with Emma on his lap, both laughing as she attempted to feed him a cookie. The frame was engraved with a simple inscription, "Some heroes don't wear capes." "This is nice," Jamal said, genuinely touched. "Thank you. We're the ones who should be thanking you," Elaine replied, "every day." As they prepared to part ways, Elaine and Emma to their townhouse, Jamal and Marjorie to their apartment, Emma suddenly broke free from her mother's grasp. She ran to Jamal, arms upraised in the universal toddler signal to be picked up. He obliged, lifting her easily. Emma planted a sloppy kiss on his cheek, then solemnly offered him her precious stuffed dog. "Mine," she said. Then, with great deliberation, "Yours, too." It was a small moment, a child's impulsive generosity, a toy shared, a connection acknowledged. Yet in that simple gesture lay the essence of what had brought them all together on that winter night a year ago, the recognition of another's need, and the instinct to respond with what one has to give. Jamal returned the dog with equal solemnity. "Thank you, Emma, I'll remember that." As they drove away, Marjorie glanced at her grandson, noting the thoughtful expression on his face. "You did good, child," she said simply. "Then and now." Jamal nodded, watching through the rear window as Elaine buckled Emma into her car seat, the little girl still waving enthusiastically in their direction. The bronze plaque gleamed in the winter sunlight, marking not just a place but a moment, the intersection of lives that might never have touched, the beginning of a story none of them could have imagined. A year ago, he had been a boy with a broom, doing his job on a cold winter night. Now he was something more, not just a hero in a news story that had faded from headlines, but a vital thread in the new fabric of lives rewoven after near unraveling. The scholarship bearing his name would open doors for others. The bond with Emma would continue to shape both their lives in ways yet to be discovered. Some circles, once formed, never truly close. They simply widen, encompassing more of the world with each passing year.